Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today you're checking out my new Magicka Dragonknight PvP build. This is updated for the Murkmire DLC, and this is the Fire and Blood build. So with this build we've got very high sustain, good survivability, tons of self-healing, and a lot of burst damage too. Overall it's just been a really fun build to play, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So we'll cover the stats, the gear sets that I'm using, a few different skills you can try, champion points, and more coming up next. Alright, so let's jump into the basic stats on the build. Let me buff up here, use our potion as well. So 35k max Magicka, 19k health, that'll be about 22 or 23k health in PvP, 14k stamina, 2200 Magicka recovery. Spell damage is 2000 right now. We do have a weapon damage glyph on the back bar, so that'll be about 2500 when that buff is running. 39% crit is looking really good. Let me make sure I have my resistances fully buffed here. So we are in light armor on the build, but the resistances are looking pretty solid. 27k spell resist, 22k physical resist, and 23 crit resistance. So I'm not fully min-maxed on the build yet. I don't have my Undaunted passives unlocked, for example, on this new character. So you can definitely play with the stats and get a little bit more out of this. I am using all my points into max Magicka. I do have solid stamina, and that's because I am a Dark Elf. I think Dark Elf is still the best in slot for a Magicka Dragonknight. Could also do a High Elf. That would be pretty decent as well. But definitely Dragonknight as a Dark Elf is good because you get the bonus stamina and Magicka, which is really great for PvP, and you get that bonus fire damage. I am using the Tower Mundus, so one reason why I'm using the Tower is I'm actually not using Shackle Breaker. It's a surprise for me on this build, but I felt like I needed a little bit extra stamina, especially in Battlegrounds where your base stats are lower. So I like the Tower on this. You can substitute anything you want here. You could do max Magicka or spell damage. But for me, this really helped my overall stats. And then I am using Witch Mother's Potent Brew as the drink. And that's going to play into one of our sets, which I'll get to in a minute. As far as potions, I'm just using the base spell damage potion. You can get that from any Alliance War vendor or the Battleground vendor, so that's great. Those are cheap and easy to pick up. Also, maybe worth mentioning is I'm actually not a vampire at all on this build. I don't think vampire lends a lot of usefulness to a Magicka DK, and it can be sometimes more damage that you're going to take from things like Dawnbreakers. So I felt like maybe vampire wasn't necessary, and my stats are looking decent enough where I don't think I need the extra recovery, but that's something you can think about on your own. So let's jump into the sets next. Starting with our first 5-piece set, I am using Bright Throat's Boast, which is a new Murkmire DLC set. It's basically the Magicka version of Bone Pirate, if you're familiar with that set. It is really good. It's better than I thought it would be, actually, when I put it on the DK build. So the stats here, you get 2 max Magicka bonuses, an extra Magicka recovery bonus, and then anytime you're using a drink buff, you get that nice bonus to max Magicka and Magicka recovery. So it's a really good set overall for PvP, just giving us very high max Magicka, really helping our Magicka recovery a lot, and letting us use extra glyphs like spell damage and different traits on our jewelry as well. So I can really highly recommend this set for Magicka builds now, especially the Magicka DK that I'm running now. It's the first time I've used this set, and I really love it, so I'm going to probably use it on other setups as well in the future. It is a light armor set. Like I said, this is a light armor build. I'm using 6 pieces of light, 1 heavy right now. You could definitely do 5-1-1, as I mentioned earlier, for extra max stats. And so I've got the feet, I've got hands, waist, and then I've got 2 pieces of jewelry here, which I'm just running 2 blue rings, which were cheap enough to pick up that I thought I would go for it. I wouldn't recommend buying purple at this point because those are like 100 or 200k at least on console. So buy the blue, and then when you have time, definitely upgrade those yourself. The next 5-piece set that we're using is going to be Fortified Brass. And the reason for fortified brass is I did want to play a light armor build, but I didn't want to be super squishy. I didn't want to use a shield at all on the build. So I think fortified brass plays really well with light armor. You get that extra bonus resistance and health that's going to make you still super tanky in full light armor and let you still do high damage. So I love this set. You guys know it already. I use it on tons of other builds. And I really like pairing this set with a high stat set. So pairing this with our Bright Throat is a really good combo. So for the pieces I'm running there, I am using the heavy chest just to get the most resistances I can on the build. And then I'm using light fortified brass legs. I'm using a piece of jewelry here. I'm using the neck piece. And then I'm using fortified brass weapons. And that's definitely the way to go. You don't want to try to farm Bright Throat weapons right now. That's not going to be fun. So definitely craft yourself the fortified brass. Very easy to craft. And you can craft it in any trait you want. So I'm using the Nirnhoned flame staff on the front bar. And then I'm using a infused ice staff on the back bar. So this is a double Destro build. We'll get into the skills in a little bit. So again, Nirnhoned infused on the back bar. And then for our last set, we're using Valken, which is just a pretty typical, I think, set for the Magicka Dragonknight. You could do other things here if you don't like Valken. Another option I've tried, which is pretty good, is Slimecraw. That gives you the 8% minor berserk damage. But I like the proc here. The fact that we have lots of dots means that this meteor flame damage is going to be very consistent. And it has a good uptime of 5 seconds for that effect. So I really like this on the Magicka DK, but again, you could do other sets here. As far as traits and glyphs, for your armor, you want as much impen as possible. 7 would be great. If you don't have 7, you could do 5 impen, 2 well fitted. That's what I would recommend. Again, I'm running a light armor build, so I would recommend at least 5-1-1. If not, you can run 6 light and 1 heavy for the extra health. And then for our jewelry traits, one other thing here, which I thought was kind of interesting, is I actually did a bloodthirsty trait on my crafted necklace. That's where the name comes from, fire and blood, right? So it's going to increase our damage by 9% once our enemies get below 25% health. I think this is a strong choice on the Magicka DK because if you know the class at all, you understand that they don't have a spammable execute skill. And so what you're relying on pretty much is just your whip damage. And when an opponent gets low, this is going to make those whips and light attacks and our damage over time hit even harder, basically like a built-in execute. So I like this on the build a lot. I would even consider running 2 or 3 of these. If you have your Undaunted unlocked and your stats are a little bit higher, think about running at least 2 bloodthirsty traits. I think that would just be insane damage. But for now, I have 1 bloodthirsty, 2 arcane, and I'm using 1 spell damage and 2 magicka recovery. Let's move on to the skills next. So starting with our front bar, this is our destruction staff, our flame staff on the front bar, and I'm starting off with burning embers. This is just a very nice damage over time with a strong heal at the end, up to 81% of the total damage. So one reason why this build works really well, as you'll see on our front bar especially, is we just have lots of abilities that do damage and heal us at the same time. And this is one of those. This is one of the reasons why you don't need a restoration staff on a Magicka DK anymore. You can actually play with 2 Destro staffs. You can do Destro and Sword and Board. You can do a lot of different options. You can even run a 2-hander on the back bar. And you'll have enough healing with the self-healing that the class has access to. And this is just part of that. Another reason why I like this is it does apply that slow from the Ardent Flame skill line passive, and it has a very low cost. You can see only 1100 magicka on that one. Next up, I've got Race Against Time, and I'd consider this probably to be one of the flex spots on the build. I'm using Race Against Time just for the speed here, so it reduces the cost of sprinting for 3 seconds and gives us Major Expedition for 3 seconds. So I'm kind of using this speed boost as a gap closer and a way to escape as well. You can do that other ways. Another way you could do that if you don't like this skill is you could put Empowering Chains here. And Empowering Chains can be your gap closer. One of the reasons why I didn't like that specific playstyle is Empowering Chains actually puts your enemy on CC immunity, which the way I structured this build with using stuns and using our Flame Lash, it just didn't work for me. So you can use Empowering Chains if you want, but just know that that's going to put them on CC immunity, and you won't be able to stun them to combo in your Flame Lash and your Power Lash specifically for more healing. So that just didn't work for me. I liked using just more of a speed skill here, so race against time in this case. I like this versus the other morph. The other morph gives you a longer buff for Major Expedition, but it does have a cast time, and cast times are just really hard to deal with in PvP, specifically Battlegrounds where tons of stuff is going on. So I like this on the front bar for our gap closer. Next up, I've got Shattering Rocks, and this is our stun / heal. So I went with this morph over Fossilized because, again, I'm not running a Resto Staff, so I'm looking for more self-healing, and this really does it. So we get the stun for 3 seconds, and then the next time the target attacks us, hits us back, basically, we get that 5-6k self-heal back from the ability. So it's really nice just to keep your health kind of topped off in the middle of combat. I really like this skill. And we're going to combine that, obviously, with Flame Lash for the whip combo. So we have the basic whip here, you can see. And then that will, if your target is stunned or immobilized, it sets them off balance, which can then proc Power Lash. Power Lash gives you that huge heal, you can see. It's still really good, even though it can only occur every 3 seconds. So that's something you have to think about. But chances are you're only going to be using it every 3 to 4 seconds anyways, so I think it's perfect. And it just does tons of damage. This, combined with our Bloodthirsty trait when the enemy gets low, means this is just burning through enemies really fast. So I love this skill. Pretty low cost too, very effective. And then we've got Inner Light, and Inner Light is just to make the most of our Magicka pool here, as well as give us the spell critical boost on the front bar, which is really important. Like I said, the whips on this build hit hard, but the critical strike whips hit even harder. So I think having this on the front bar is the way to go for sure. And then last but not least is our ultimate, and I chose the Destruction Staff ultimate here for the main reason that I needed the passive, and the passive that we are talking about in Destruction Staff, Ancient Knowledge. So equipping a Flame Staff increases your damage done with single target abilities, like Whip for example, by 8%, but that's only with a Destruction Staff ability slotted, okay? So this is where I kind of go off track from the typical Magicka DK build, I think, is most Magickas would have Leap here on the front bar, but that means you'd have to slot something else in order to get that passive, and I didn't really like those options. So it doesn't really matter what morph you pick of Firestorm. I just use it here for the passive. I'm never going to use this ability. I'm just using it to make my whips hit stronger, basically. If you don't like that play style, and don't worry, I do have Leap on the back bar, but if you would prefer to front bar Leap, then you'll have to slot a Destro skill, and in that case, what you would probably do on this build is get rid of your speed and slot something like Elemental Drain. Elemental Drain will help you with your sustain. It'll help you do a little bit more damage, but I just felt like I didn't have enough time to really use that skill effectively, and I wanted a gap closer instead. So this is the way I set up the front bar. It works for me, but you can move things around if you want. So let's check out the back bar. Starting out with Blockade of Frost. And I really like Blockade on a Magicka DK, and it's just because it helps you control your opponents better. It lays down that thick wall, which is going to slow them. You can see it has a 60% movement speed reduction, which is huge. It also has a chance to immobilize for free. So that's really going to help us control our enemies, keep them where we want them, circle around behind, hit them with whips, hit them with embers, get in our Shattering Rocks, and combo that with our Power Lash. So for me, Blockade of Frost is just a control tool. It's really nice in 1v1s or 1v2s just to help you control the fight and make them fight on your own terms, especially good against stamina classes, which will try to run circles around you. This really helps you control them. The other nice added benefit of having a Frost staff on your back bar is you can block on your back bar with additional passives, and you can use Magicka instead of stamina. So I think right here in Tri-Focus, you're blocking with a Frost staff is going to consume Magicka instead of stamina, so that's really good if you're out of stamina. And then under Ancient Knowledge, you also get reduced block cost and increased damage absorption, basically, of your blocking on the back bar. So I do like that fact that I can block on my back bar and consume Magicka, and then block on my front bar and consume stamina. So there's a nice balance there. Like I said, though, at the beginning, you can choose literally any back bar weapon to suit your playstyle on this build. Some people might be more comfortable with sword and board. You can definitely do that. So whatever suits your playstyle, but this is what's working for me right now. Next up, I've got Reflective Plate, and this is definitely a must-have, reflecting those projectiles back, up to 4 projectiles, plus the immunity to snares and immobilizations. You want to use this the majority of time instead of roll dodging. You'll want to make sure you're using your Reflective Plate on the back bar just to conserve your stamina. And then obviously it's going to help you take a lot less damage from ranged targets like Mag Sorks, Magicka Nightblades, even Stamina Nightblades spamming snipe at you. This is what you need. Coagulating Blood is our burst heal on the back bar. This has a pretty strong tooltip, but it increases based on your missing health. You also get a bonus to health recovery when this is active, so it's really effective. That's one of the main reasons why you don't need a Resto Staff on this build, combined with our passive healing from Power Lash, from Burning Embers, and one of our other buffs, which you'll see. That plus your burst heal means you'll have no problem healing on this build whatsoever. So I do really like this skill. Volatile Armor is our major resolve and major ward, so that's going to help our defenses. And you get a nice little damage over time too if you happen to use this around enemies. And then Cauterize is another heal over time. So you might be more familiar with the damaging version of this, Flames of Oblivion, which is another great skill. And you can choose to run Flames if you want, if you think your healing is okay. But this burst heal every 5 seconds, I've just really been getting a lot of use out of this. So I like the healing more on the back bar. This also gives us Major Prophecy on the back bar as well. So we get it from Inner Light on the front, Cauterize on the back. And then last up is Ferocious Leap. I told you guys I'm going to use it no matter what. It is on the back bar, but that's really not an issue for me. It still does decent damage. You can use it as a gap closer, as a way to initiate a fight. So it's just a great ultimate to have. Pretty low cost too. So this is what I use basically 99% of the time for my ultimate. So next we can take a look at how I would build the CP on this character. Starting in our green tree, I put 34 into Warlord, 33 into Sprinter, 75 Arcanist, 27 Mooncalf, 23 Healthy, 40 into Shadow Ward, 37 into Tumbling, 32 into Blessed, 37 Elfborn, 23 Spell Erosion, 49 Elemental Expert, 29 into Staff Expert because we are using a lot of light attacks, 72 into Master at Arms, so just buffing our direct damage as much as possible. And then 28 into Thaumaturge because we are using some damage over time effects. 66 Ironclad, 40 into Resistant, boosting our crit resist. 64 into Hardy, 43 into Elemental because as a Dragon Knight in light armor you get tons of spell resistance. So you can save quite a few points here if you want. 34 into Thick Skinned. 23 into Quick Recovery. Well, that's going to wrap it up for the Magicka Dragonknight PvP build Fire and Blood. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you hit that like button for me and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Why the heck not? It is free and it would really help me out. I've also got a few more build videos coming up, including a Stamina Sorcerer PvP build, so make sure you hit the bell for that so you get to see those as soon as they come out. And until then, I will see you guys around in the next video. Peace.